welcome back to the Community Over Code. Well, welcome back to the Build Propulsion Lab at the Community Over Code. I'm here with Rich Bowen. Welcome, Rich. Today we're going to talk about the ASF. I think a lot of folks don't understand how these types of foundations work. But before we get into that, why don't you introduce yourself?
So my name's Rich Bowen, and I've been doing stuff with the Apache Software Foundation since shortly before we became a foundation. I started working with the Apache Web Server project in 96, 97, and the ASF officially incorporated in 99. And I'm currently serving on the board of directors.
So you're an OG.
Yeah.
Great. Well, since you started that way, why was the ASF founded?
Yeah, and so, origin stories sometimes help you understand the superhero. Back in 1994, there was a college programming project called the NCSA Web Server. This was the Wide Web, and it was a senior project at the university. When that group of students graduated and started a company called Netscape, that code base was abandoned. But there were a bunch of people that were already using that code to run their businesses. And so again, this is very early in the life of the World Wide Web. And several of those individuals got together and started trading patches against this software. The code was free, but it was unmaintained. And this group of 8 people started trading patches between one another over a mailing list, and eventually released a code base called the Apache Web Server. And I tell you that story because the fact that this software project was abandoned, became unmaintained, and was essentially co-opted by a for-profit corporation inspired these young men at the time to say, what can we do to make sure that doesn't happen again? And so everything about the Apache Software Foundation is around that concept. It's a place where software projects can operate independently. And independence is one of our core values. The notion that a software project can define its own destiny and not be at risk of being taken over by corporate interests or by one individual, that everything is owned by the community. So today, we started with one project back in 99, and today we have somewhere around 300 projects. Each one of these projects operates as much as possible independently. Now, in order to do that, there are certain rules about how you operate your community, and so we have always this tension between rules and freedom, like you do in any civilized society. The board of directors exists to ensure that the corporation, the foundation, operates legally according to the laws of U.S. nonprofits, and that these individual projects are operating independently and not being overly controlled by one company or one individual or even a small group of individuals.
Okay, so that's why the foundation exists. And you mentioned that each project is sort of independent. So why do all these foundations need kind of a governing foundation that sits on top instead of all these little projects going off and doing their own foundation?
Yeah. The foundation exists to provide a legal framework in which these projects can operate. And again, the foundation myth, the origin myth of the foundation is that at the beginning, IBM wanted to build a product on top of one of our projects, and they needed a legal entity that they could work with, that they could sponsor. So that's one of the things that the foundation is able to do. It's able to take in sponsorship dollars in order to fund infrastructure, there are a number of services that the foundation offers. Infrastructure is the most expensive one, but we also offer marketing and this conference and legal services. We have an office that keeps track of public policy. So one of the things that the foundation does is ensure that independent projects are operating in accordance with international laws. And that's kind of a big deal right now because of this new legislation in Europe called the CRA, which makes software projects, even free software projects, responsible and liable for the effects of their software. So like if your software causes someone to be injured or there's other legal liability there, the foundation exists to give legal cover for that. So that if somebody sues your project, they're not suing you individually, they're suing the foundation. And that's kind of a big deal as the world becomes more litigious around software.
Yeah, so all of these things, I think, your average project that pops up on GitHub isn't going to have access to all of these things.
And it's still very unclear because these various legislations are just kind of starting. It's very unclear how much liability an independent project on GitHub would have. That is still to be legislated. But there are certain requirements that a software project has to live up to in order to abide by these various international laws. And the ASF, one of its roles is to provide a legal framework where projects can live up to those standards.
Wow, so you mentioned 300-something projects right now, top-level projects,
yeah.
in a handful of incubating projects.
That's right. I think we have about 30 incubating projects right now. And the incubator exists to take a project and ensure that it can operate within the ASF. And that involves being able to release software under the Apache license. It involves having a community, and there are certain definitions of what a functional community is. The bare minimum is that you have 3 individuals who are able to vote on releases. But hopefully you've got a little bit more than that. And it also is to ensure that software projects are not dominated by one particular company to the detriment of other participants.
All right, so if I want to take, say, this fictitious GitHub project I have, and I want to find a home for it,
yeah.
Like at the ASF, how would I go about doing that?
So you go to incubator.apache.org, and there is an applications process where you write a proposal that says, I want a project and make it part of the foundation. And that gets voted on by the incubator, and they accept that project into the incubator and assign a mentor or perhaps multiple mentors to that project to guide them through the process of being able to release software under the Apache license and building community. And that process, it takes a while. It can take a few months. There are times when it has taken a few years, when a project is unable to establish sufficient community, or whether there are legal problems with the code, or maybe it's patent encumbered. That can take longer.
Wow, so if I bring my project to the ASF, I go through the incubator, I need a community, right, before I can kind of move forward.
Yeah.
So has that blocked a lot of incubator projects, or is that something that the ASF has helped these projects with, or the mentor? How does that fit into the mix?
Yeah, and in any open source project, you hope that a community shows up, and that doesn't always happen. Building community can be challenging depending on the particular technology that you're working in, or it can happen very quickly if the technology has a lot of popularity. There are things that one can do to make your community more welcoming, to make it easier for people to contribute their first patch or whatever. But yeah, there have been projects that have been unable to build a sufficient community and have ended up retiring from the incubator. I don't have statistics off the top of my head on that, but that does indeed happen.
And that's not necessarily a bad thing, right?
Well, it's not. And our position at the ASF is that some projects don't belong here, and that's fine. But when we release software from the Apache Software Foundation, that means something. It means that it is quality software with a community behind it. And there are projects that don't meet our bar, but that's not necessarily a bad thing. It's just projects at the ASF have a particular type, and we stand behind that, and we think it's the right way to develop software, but it's not the only right way to develop software.
I like how you put that. That's good. All right, Rich, so we're kind of wrapping up time here. So where can our viewers go to learn more about the ASF or how the foundation works or anything related?
Well, let me tell you 3 websites that you should look at. One is apache.org, and that is our top-level website. The second one that I'll point you to is community.apache.org, and this is a site where we discuss some of the things I've just talked about, but best practices around building Apache-style communities. And the third one I mentioned earlier was incubator.apache.org, where you can see not only how projects go through the incubator, but what projects are currently in there.
Awesome. Well, thanks again, Rich. I appreciate your time, and thanks for watching, and we'll be here all week at Community Over Code for the Build Propulsion Lab.
Thank you.